Okay, I've started the recording. Hello and welcome back to the 4 books of Confucian learning. Today is the final talk on the Mencius. And over the last couple of weeks, we've looked at Mencius's theory on human nature, how every human being is born with these incipient moral qualities and therefore have the capacity to become good. Now, you might be wondering how cultivating our moral character, working on our moral sprouts, how that links and connects with our practice of the conduct outlined in the deeds of way, the guidelines for students and children. Well, the Mencius provides the answer in chapter 4. Mencius said, "What is the greatest service? The service of parents is the greatest. What is the greatest matter of preservation? The preservation of one's character is the greatest. I've heard of those who, not losing their character, have been able to serve their parents, but I've not heard of those who, having lost their character, being able to serve their parents. Who does not serve anyone? Serving one's parents is the root of all service. Who does not preserve anything? Preserving one's character is the root of all preservation." And interestingly, the Chinese term for preservation encompasses maintain, to maintain our moral qualities, to develop, maintain our good ethical character. So Mencius makes it very clear that maintaining and preserving our good moral character is a prerequisite to serving our parents and everyone else. Serving our parents is the root of all service. And it's interesting, you might think, why are parents prioritized? Why is there such emphasis and focus on the service of parents? Well, if you think about it, if you remember the 5 categories of interpersonal relationships, the first of those 5 is actually the relationship between parent and child. You could say that this relationship between parent and child is the very first relationship in our life. And if you've ever observed, babies, the way that they look at their parents with complete trust and love, it's unconditional. And the same could be said for how parents look upon their children too. You could say that parents were the first people to show us what unconditional love really means. Every one of us, we come into this world with nothing at all, and yet our parents love us enough to care for us when we need it the most. They go without sleep, as new parents do. They put up with us in illness and before toilet training. So this natural love between parent and child, it was considered very much to be the foundation for all moral virtue, certainly in the Confucian context. And, family reverence, the idea of serving our parents, repaying their kindness towards us, that was the foundation for service of, everyone else. Because it certainly starts in the family, but it doesn't end in the family. Now, this is very much reflected in the classic of family reverence. We've come across this classic before, and in this particular text, Confucius explains to his student, Master Zhengzi, about practicing family reverence, what it's all about. And in this opening chapter, he makes it clear that our body, with its hair and skin, every strand of hair, every inch of our skin, is received from our parents. And not presuming to harm or injure our body is the start, the beginning of family reverence. Establishing our moral character, working on our moral sprouts, practicing the way of the highest learning, and cultivating a lasting renown to bring esteem to our father and mother, honouring our parents, that is the consummation of family reverence. This family reverence commences in service to our parents. it continues in service to the ruler, our contribution to society, to king and country, and culminates in establishing our character. So, key to all of this, it boils down to our good ethical character. Establishing, maintaining, preserving this good moral character is key, it's a prerequisite to serving our parents. Now, okay, our parents sort of come first, and that's why we would prioritize working on our moral qualities. But what does it exactly mean to serve our parents? What does this family reverence concept involve? In the records of ritual, and the records of ritual is actually one of the 5 classics associated with Confucian learning. Master Zheng elaborates, tells us that there are 3 degrees or levels of family reverence. This idea of serving our parents, the highest is honoring our parents. Second is not disgracing, not causing them to suffer shame or reproach. And the most basic level is being able to support them, caring for them, looking after their well-being. That in itself encompasses many different levels, from their physical welfare to their mental health and their other aspirations. In this passage, Zhengzi was talking to his students, and one of his students, Gong Mingyi, asks Zhengzi, says, can you, master, be considered an example of family reverence? And Zhengzi humbly deflects this question. He says, what on earth are you saying? What the exemplary person, he refers to the exemplary person, what the exemplary person would call family reverence entails anticipating their parents' wishes, so being really proactive, carrying out their intentions, and instructing them in the way, so supporting our parents to cultivate their moral qualities and achieve moral excellence. That might involve giving them advice and remonstration when we see that they, are veering towards misconduct. So it's not just blindly following along with all of their instructions. Zhengzi concludes by saying, I'm simply one who supports their parents, the most basic level. How can I have practiced family reverence? So we can understand that this serving our parents, there are many levels to this moral practice. And it's probably getting a little theoretical and abstract. So let's take a look at a historical example. And we have one in Zilu, who is one of Confucius's top 10 students. He was also actually the most senior student because he was only 9 years younger than Confucius. And he had a particular, was particularly recognized for his ability for governing. Well, when Zilu was young, as he was growing up, his family was very poor. And he sort of ate, what did he eat? He ate what's called in Chinese, li huo, which is the most sort of the coarse, plainest foods. It literally translates to the edible weeds and bean leaves. That's because they were very poor. But he always ensured that, his parents would be served better food. In fact, he would walk, here it says carrying rice for 100 miles. This is 100 Chinese miles. So it comes to approximately over 50 kilometers. He would walk to buy and bring back the rice for his parents. And, rice being a dietary staple, you can imagine that he did this not once, but regularly, if not also frequently. So this gives us an idea of, how he really did his best in ensuring that his parents were healthy, they were happy, and, he's praised for his, that's part of the reason why he is praised by Confucius for his family reverence. And he's actually one of the top 24 exemplars of family reverence of all time. Now, after his parents pass away, Zilu was actually appointed to a senior role as a high official in the southern state of Chu. And, with a salary of a high official, that would, encompass many thousand, 10,000 measures of cereal grain. More than enough. You would never have to worry about making ends meet. And there would be lavish spreads of the finest foods. So obviously his parents weren't around to enjoy this with him, and he felt very sad about that. He remarked to Confucius, saying that he would reminisce of the times in the past where his life, he would have to walk so far and to bring back the grain for his parents. He would be eating the simplest foods, but he felt joy. He enjoyed doing this. It was never a chore for him. It delighted him that he could make his parents happy and healthy. So it gives us some idea of this hands-on approach to looking after our parents from the bottom of our hearts. And this providing support obviously entails ensuring that our parents have all that they need. They have a home that is secure and comfortable, and they have transportation to go where they need. But it also starts with the little things as well. Like we know in the Mencius that Zingzi, he was always mindful. He knew that his father had a favorite, one of the favorite foods of his father was a certain type of date. Now, the question for us is, do we know our parents' favorite foods and how they would like their food to be cooked? It starts with the little things like that. And this providing support for our parents, looking after them, it's not something that can just be ticked off by adding them as an additional card holder to our credit card. And the reason is because there's no substitute for taking personal care of our parents, taking care of them personally, and spending time, quality time with our parents. It might seem that it takes a lot of time, time that we would spend maybe with our friends and colleagues or enjoying ourselves on holidays. But actually, by spending that time with our parents, we stand to gain so much more. We have the opportunity to learn from their lifetime of knowledge and experience, their seasoned perspectives. It could be as simple as looking after the home and garden. We learn so many things that you can't learn anywhere else, like how to mend a knitted jumper or how to grow larger mangoes. By spending this time with our parents looking after them, we learn how to look after an older person. So, for example, if we were to give them a back massage, we'll be able to notice if their skin is a bit drier, say in the wintertime, and apply the moisturizer so that they don't feel itchy from the dry skin. We can be a bit more proactive. And that means that maybe we can worry a little bit less about their health and their well-being. And if we were to entrust their care to somebody else, maybe we would have to chase and follow up. So that's one less thing we would need to do. And by eating with our parents, we'll be able to notice when their appetites change. We'll be able to adjust the menu. So cooking foods that are easier to digest would put less pressure on their digestive system, as the body ages, and they feel more energized. So there are so many different things that we can learn and be proactive about, and it makes all the difference. And at the end of the day, more than any of those benefits, I'd say that by spending quality time and looking after our parents personally, we set a positive example for others. It could be our own children or other young people in the neighborhood, so that they might get a few ideas on how they go about looking after their parents too. So I think that's the story of Zulu carrying the rice gives us insight on what we would need to do to serve our parents at the very basic level. And there's an example of a hands-on approach from another person in another time in Chinese history. And this is Yang Wei, who lived in the 16th century. a time known as Ming Dynasty in China. He served the emperor as the Minister of Personnel. So a very high position, a very important position, because as the minister, he was the head of the ministry, the department. There was actually 6 ministries that comprised the administrative core of the central government. And his ministry, you could say his department, was responsible for the recruitment of government officials and their ongoing appraisals. Be responsible for their promotion or demotion, and recognizing, rewarding their meritorious service. So a very important role. But whenever he was off duty, away from the court, Yang Wei would devote himself to looking after his elderly mother. She lived to the age of 104. So let's have a look at what Yang Wei did. What did he do for his mum? Well, Yang Wei helped her by bringing the water, would wash her face and brush her teeth in the mornings, he would make her teas, and basically help out with everything that needed to be done around the house, or the maybe heavy lifting, and helped his mother do all the things that she wanted to do. In the springtime, he even made new clothes with flowery designs for his mother, and he would take her out on picnics under the shade of the tree to really enjoy all the beautiful sights and smells of springtime, with tree blossoms and new blooms. So you get the idea that he really made his mother feel loved. She had things to look forward to. Her life was interesting and fun. She didn't feel lonely or left out or bored at all. And, it's probably no accident that Yang Wei himself lived to the age of, was 92. And he actually resigned 3 times from his job just to be there for his mum. It's recorded that, he often was always grateful to her for the sacrifices that she made as he was growing up. They came from a very poor background, and there were times when his mother actually had to go out and beg just to get by. So he was always grateful for all the things that his parents did for him. And his story sort of reminds us of all that our parents do, their love and care in raising us. Without parents, we wouldn't be where we are today, essentially. So it's certainly important that, if Yang Wei, in his important job and busy schedule, could still find time to look after his mother, it means that everyone else can do the same. It's not about giving up our job, but we can give our parents our undivided attention whenever we're with them, whenever we're talking to them. So we're able to hear what they say, really listen, and hear what they don't say. We know what's on their mind, what they're worried about, how they're feeling, all of those things. Now, it's also important, as our parents aren't getting any younger, it's best not to leave it too late. There are some things in life that can't wait, and spending quality time with our parents happens to be one of them. In fact, in the Mencius, Mencius highlights that the exemplary person takes joy in 3 things. Being ruler of the world is not one of them. The very first joy is that their parents are both alive. You want to make the most of that time. And their brothers or their siblings are without troubles. That's their very first joy. The second joy, what they take pleasure in, is that they can look up without feeling abashed before heaven and look down without being ashamed before others. They've worked and cultivated their moral character. And the third joy is gaining the eminent talents of the world and educating them. So basically, being able to make a difference, educating, teaching the next generation of bright talents. And ultimately, we can do all of that by setting a good example. So the fact that the exemplary person would rejoice in having, their parents still around, alerts us to the fact that we should make the most of this opportunity. It's a limited time. And that's why there's a common quote: love your parents and treat them with care, for you will only know their value when you see the empty chair. We don't want to leave this too late. In the Mencius, provides us with this passage. It's about how Zengzi and his son, how they each took care of their fathers. When Zengzi took care of his father, Zengzi, he always provided meat and wine. And when the meal was being cleared, he would ask respectfully, to whom the remaining food should be given. If his father asked whether there was food left over, he would always say that there is. And in the past, the family elders would be served the best food. And maybe they would even, get to eat first. And so that's why Zengzi would ask, for the remaining food, who his father would like to share this good food with. Now, after the passing, after Zengzi passed away, Zeng Yuan, who's the son of Zengzi, cared for Zengzi, and he also always provided meat and wine. But when the meal was cleared, Zeng Yuan didn't ask to whom the remaining food should be given. And if Zengzi asked whether there was food left over, Zeng Yuan would always say, there's nothing left, intending to serve them again. Mencius includes that this is what is meant by serving our parents' mouth and body. Someone like Zengzi can be said to have served their parents' intentions. So a higher level. Serving one's parents as Zengzi did is correct. Now you never think about why Zengzi would always ask, his father's wishes, and why Zeng Yuan didn't. But it highlights the fact that loving and taking care of our parents extends to respecting their wishes, knowing about their wishes. And if we don't know, taking the care to ask what they would prefer, what they would like. And by assuring his father that there was food left over, he was conscious that his father would want to share the good food with his children and grandchildren. And as a bit of encouragement to the younger ones. But by assuring his father that there was food left over, it would maybe save his father from worrying, do they have enough? Does everyone have enough to eat in his household? And that was something that maybe Zeng Yuan didn't consider. So that was sort of not as good as how Zengzi did. Now, if we look at this passage, highlights that loving and taking care of our parents extends to knowing and respecting their wishes, but that also involves not making them worry about us, whether that's our health or our work or our family. And it also means not doing things behind their back. And this is sort of exemplified in the next historical example. It involves an individual called Guo Tai. Now, we don't know his dates, but we do know that he worked as a school teacher. He would teach in the family schools, in the local community, helping the young children learn to read and write, have the fundamental learning that they would need to maybe carry on their family business, and prepare them for those who wish to pursue, to try to sit the civil service examinations to pursue a career as a government official. So that was his job. Now, Guo Tai didn't have the very best relationship with his father. This was because after the birth of his two younger brothers, his father favoured his younger brothers over him. But even though his father was unfair, you could say, in favouring his younger brothers, Gu Tai still loved and respected his father, and he still, supported the whole family, including his younger brothers. In fact, he contributed his entire teaching salary to the support of the family. Now, one year, he was appointed as the teacher of the family school, the Zhang family. And Mr. Zhang, presumably the head of this family, he had heard of how devoted Gu Tai was to his family, his practice of family reverence. And Mr. Zhang decided to test Gu Tai. So on the very first day of term, at the beginning of the year, he presents Gu Tai with this lump sum of half of the year's salary, sort of in advance, as a lump sum up front. And he suggests to Gu Tai that, there's a plot of land nearby that is for sale. You could use this money to buy the land and rent it out to labourers. And by the autumn, you would be able to collect the rent, which is a portion of the harvested crops. And, you could sell the crops and generate some money on the side, some extra money for yourself, for your own private purposes. So it sounds like a good idea, but Gu Tai, he's a very honest person, and he loves his family sincerely. So he doesn't take up the suggestion, but he contributes all of that sum gives that to his father for the support of the whole family. You can imagine that maybe he might have discussed with his father if the family as a whole would be interested in this investment opportunity. But the moral of the story is that, Gu Tai, just because his father was unfair to him, there was no excuse. He didn't retaliate. He contributed, his entire salary, continued to do so. He didn't sort of walk out and cut ties with his family. And, later on, no coincidence that he had a son, also very filial and highly accomplished. In fact, his son was appointed to serve in the Imperial Academy, which is the highest academic institution in the state. And it was the Imperial Academy that sort of set the orthodox interpretations of the texts to be examined in the civil service examinations. So you could say that Gu Tai, his practice of family reverence by raising a son of good moral character and, good accomplishments, brought honour to his family. And this is, as Sun Tzu identifies, the highest level of serving our parents, of family reverence. Now, Sun Tzu also highlights that the exemplary person would be proactive, anticipating our parents' wishes. And there's a very good example of this in the case of Qin Zanyuan. This is from the Qing dynasty this time. Qin Zanyuan was very young when his father passed away. And he took it on himself to really look after his mother. Like Zilu, they were poor. He ate, the plainest coarse foods, but he always ensured that his mother would be served better foods. When he grew up, he took up a job as a teacher, teaching a local family. They lived about 2 kilometers away. So despite the distance between his home and his work, he would always ensure that he would be home to greet his mother in the morning and to ensure that she rested comfortably every night. And this was the case come rain, hail, or shine. He was always there for his mother, and you imagine that she would have peace of mind to have him around. In fact, he looked after his mother so well that it's recorded that she completely forgot about their lowly circumstances, and she was extremely proud of him. One of the reasons is because he actually was ranked first in the palace examinations, and this was the highest level of civil service examinations. It meant that he could look forward to a high position, serving as a government official, and probably at the central court. So it was, incredible prestige and honor for the entire family, including his mum, including his parents. So that was another example of a practice, exemplary practice of family reverence, not just providing that support, the material comforts for our parents, doing our best within our means, but bringing honour to the family through our moral character and our accomplishments. Elsewhere in the Mencius, though, we find that Mencius seems to downplay this idea of caring for one's parents. In this particular passage later on in chapter 4, Mencius said caring for one's parents does not suffice to be a great deed. Only sending off one's deceased parents may suffice to be a great deed. Now, I'm probably wondering, didn't Mencius say that serving our parents was the greatest service? Isn't there a bit of a contradiction? But there's actually no contradiction, because serving our parents, looking after, caring for them, is actually part and parcel of according with ritual propriety, according with ritual in fulfilling our moral obligations towards our parents throughout their lifetime, throughout our own lifetime. This is something that's an ongoing moral duty that continues after our parents, even after our parents have passed away, right up until the end of our own lives. So sending off one's deceased parents, that encompasses several aspects. And one of them is ensuring that our parents reach their intended destinations for the next life. And it's part of what Zengzi was alluding to by saying, the exemplary person, their practice of family reverence would extend to instructing our parents on the way of highest learning, so they can cultivate themselves and their characters, cultivate the causes for peaceful passing to, let's say, eternal life in heaven, with God in heaven, or rebirth in the Pure Land for Pure Land Buddhists, who believe that, reaching the Pure Land, one is able to become a Buddha with complete wisdom and compassion to help all beings. So ensuring that we support our parents in cultivating themselves to reach their intended destinations for the next life, because no one would want their parents to suffer when their time on earth comes to an end. Now, what does it mean to accord with ritual when our parents pass away? And this question is answered in chapter 3 of the Mencius, where Mencius actually provides guidance on this very subject in his advice to the ruler, the successor of a neighboring state, the state of Tang. Now, the Lord Ding, the state of Tang, passes away, and his heir, the prince, he says to his tutor, Mencius once spoke with me in the state of song, and what he said will always remain in my heart. Now, unfortunately, I've come to this point of great sadness. This is referring to the passing of his father. I would like you to go seek advice of Mencius before I carry out the funeral matters. So the prince had such high respect for Mencius that he sends his tutor to consult Mencius, on what's the appropriate thing to do on this great occasion, not only for his family, but also for the state, because obviously his father is the ruler of the state when he died. So let's have a look at what Mencius says. Ranyo, he travels to the state of Zhou, which is Mencius's native state. And Mencius said, how good of the prince to do so. The mourning of one's parents is indeed an occasion for one to do one's utmost. Mencius cites Zengzi. He says, when they're alive, when our parents are alive, we serve them according to ritual. When they're dead, we bury them according to ritual and commemorate them according to ritual. This may be called family reverence. I'm not versed in the rites for a lord's burial, but I've heard this much, and Mencius has been very humble. For the first 3 years of mourning, wearing clothes of coarse hemmed cloth, eating thin or thick congee are customary for everyone from the son of heaven to the common people in all three dynasties. He's referring to the Xia, Shang, and the Zhou dynasties. Remember, Mencius lived in the Warring States period, which is towards the latter part of the Zhou dynasty. So in all of the recent past, right through to ancient times for them, this was the common universal practice in terms of mourning. And Mencius's response sort of highlights two further aspects of sending off our departed parents. One is to ensure that their burial, the funeral, obviously accords with our parents' wishes. So nowadays, whether they would prefer to be cremated or buried, obviously has to accord with the law, any legal requirements. So, for example, the COVID rules for public gatherings like funerals, but also from what we know in passages elsewhere in the Mencius, that from Mencius's the funerals that he provided for his own parents, it's important that the funerals reflect the child's social status. So for the funeral of his father, who passed away earlier, Mencius was a scholar. So the funeral that he provided for his father as a scholar was less lavish compared to the funeral that he provided for his mother. At that time, he was serving as a high official in the state of Qi, so he could afford to do more for her, and the arrangements as to the coffin, etc., that reflected his higher position and status in society. So there are those sorts of considerations. But there is a bottom line that in terms of providing for our parents' funerals, we're not to borrow money from others. It's important that we do, make the arrangements according to within our means. Now, the other aspect of sending off our parents is commemorating. Might have heard of the practice of ancestral commemoration. This takes place, on, for example, the tomb sweeping or tomb cleaning day, or at the winter solstice. So seasonally, where we take the time to reflect on their contribution. We give thanks and reflect on to our ancestors, to our deceased parents, and reflect on what we've learned from their words and examples, and how we can live in honor of their memory. Now, it's mentioned here during the 3 years of mourning, our clothes will change, our diet will change, and that's to reflect the natural grieving process. Mencius highlights that, it's the exemplary person is so sad that this is in the next passage, which comes from the Analects. We have a student of Confucius asking about this 3-year mourning period. Sort of thinks that, why should it be 3 years? 1 year should be long enough. And he gives his reasons. And Confucius replies, well, would you feel right eating rice and wearing brocade, wearing fine clothes and eating well? And his student says, well, I would. Well, Confucius replies, if you would feel right, then do so. When the exemplary person is in mourning, fine foods are not enjoyable to them. Music brings no joy. Comfortable living doesn't feel right, and therefore they don't indulge in those things. And when the student leaves, Confucius continues. He says, you, which is Zaiwo's personal name, he has no humanity. Only after a child is 3 years old do they leave their parents' arms. In this 3-year mourning period, it's a mourning custom common throughout the world, the realm that acknowledged the authority of the Zhou dynastic court. Did not Zaiwo receive 3 years of love from his parents? And what that means is this 3-year period of mourning. It corresponds to the fact that for the first 3 years of our life, we can't do anything for ourselves. It's our parents who have to take care of us, from feeding us, dressing us, doing everything basically. And so much of their life has to revolve around us. We can't even walk. So to be specific, it's actually less than 3 years. It's about 25 to 27 months. But this period is a time, space to reflect on everything that our parents have done for us and what we can learn from their words and examples, to really live in honour of their memory. Well, why is it important to live in honour of our parents' memory? Well, in the records of ritual, Zengzi, he describes a person's body as a surviving part of our parents. Inducting the surviving part of our parents, how could one dare not be respectful? And Confucius says the same thing. He says, our body is like a branch extension of one's parents. Our parents being like the trunk and the roots, and we're the branches. So how could one dare not be respectful? It's a bit like a family tree diagram, the children being the branch extensions. Or we often read in the obituaries that, the deceased is survived by the children and their grandchildren. So what does it mean to be an extension of our parents or their surviving part? Well, Zunzi and Confucius, they emphasize the need to be respectful. This is because everything that a child does reflects on their parents as well as the rest of the family. A person's good character, their kind words and actions, their achievements, but how they treat the people around them, whether they're a diligent student, a responsible employee, all of that can be a credit to our parents. We can make our parents proud and bring honour to our whole family. But by the same token, a person's misconduct, their misdeeds, can impact directly, have a negative impact directly on our parents. So this is, people do judge our parents by how their children have turned out and their contribution to society, whether positive or negative. So that's the reason why we have to be respectful and try to be careful and prudent in our choices. Why do we want to be cautious in what we say and do, whether that's at home, in the family, or in the workplace, in the community. And there's historical account about Ling Chongmei. We don't know her dates, but she lived in Fujian province. It's a good example of the impact that a child can have on their parents even after they've passed away. So basically, her father passed away when she was very young, and shortly after she was married, her mother also passed away, and she loved her parents very much. She missed them terribly, and she would often cry for not having the opportunity to repay their kindness. And one time she meets a Buddhist monk who advises her that instead of crying, she should cultivate merits from good deeds, so that it would be a credit to her parents and bring them better fortune whichever realm they now exist. And so that's what she does. She abstains from harming any living creatures. She cultivates quiet merits. So these are the good deeds that no one else might know or notice. And these are things like looking after her family, ensuring that she raises her children to have good ethical characters, looking after her parents-in-law. And she does, basically help in any way that she could the people around her. And you might be wondering, well, did she actually have any impact and bring any benefit at all to her parents, the deceased parents? Well, after a few years of doing this, she has a dream. And in this dream, she dreams of her father. Her father tells her that both him and her mother are now in heaven because of all of the merits accumulated from her good deeds. And her parents weren't the only ones who benefited. She actually lived to the age of 96, and her children and her grandchildren, all of them, became, highly accomplished as scholar officials, serving in, really respectable positions in government. So I thought, in the absence of a family tree diagram, I thought this image of a person among the branches reminds us of this continuing duty as a branch extension of our parents to live in honour of their memory, to continue making them proud, because as children we have a profound influence on impact on our parents, and you'd say the whole family, for better or worse. Now, in this last passage I want to share, it's about Zhengzi and his last words to his students. When Zhengzi was ill, he summoned his students and said to them, "Uncover my feet and uncover my hands. Have a look." He cites the Odes, which is a collection of poetry. It's an authoritative text in this period. It says, "Tremble, tremble, be wary, as one nearing a deep pool, as one crossing thin ice." He refers to his students, "My young ones, now and hereafter, I know I've escaped injury." If you remember, as we saw from the passage in the Classic of Family Reverence, Confucius imparts his teachings on family reverence to Zhengzi. And it starts with, ensuring that there is no harm and injury to one's body that's received from our parents. Well, here, Zhengzi is telling his students, showing his students that he has practiced family reverence throughout his life. He shows them that his hands, his body is unharmed, free from injury, and by extension, he's maintained his good moral character. And so he shows us that it is humanly possible to serve our parents throughout our lifetime, to practice this family reverence. And it is through serving our parents that we can realize our moral excellence and really contribute the best to the community, to society. So not everyone will be a teacher like Zhengzi, but we all have parents. And just by being mindful of living in memory of our parents, serving our parents, we will naturally be mindful of behaving, conducting ourselves appropriately, respectfully, in whatever we do. And that's part of the reason why serving our parents is the root and basis for serving all others. Now, the 4 books have been incredibly influential throughout so much of China's long history, and in particular for the last 600 years of imperial China. The 4 books were basically studied and even memorized by everyone who was literate, who could read and write. They were considered to be sacred and inspirational because they contained the direct words and teachings of the great sages of the past, of antiquity. And these were sages, they were role models of wisdom and virtue. So that made these 4 books really special. Mencius is one of the 4. Now, nowadays, the 4 books continue to be studied, they continue to be read and even memorized. They're treasured as guides to living. And while today might be the last talk on our introduction to the 4 books, I would suggest that it's just the start of building new and improved habits for a more harmonious and happier life. If we simply put our understanding of the 4 books, apply that to our life and our work. So I want to say a big thank you to the Academy for making these talks possible, and a big thank you to each and every one of you for your kind attention. Thank you very much indeed.